This is Ranger Kidwell-Ross, editor of WorldSweeper.com and the director of the World Sweeping Association. The other panel you see is Mike Trojan, who was plus years a hydrologist with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and is really one of the leading voices in America on the topic of stormwater pollution removal and so forth, because Minnesota is one of the top states in the union about that. Minnesota is now, based on the research they did and finding out that street sweeping was very cost effective in removing pollutants. As my understanding is, and we'll know more soon, is that Minnesota is now offering credits back to MS4s for the sweeping that they do, the amount of material they pick up, and let's find out more. So Mike is gracious enough to be talking to us from, I believe, the Denver airport, as he's going home from his ASTM conference. So anyway, go ahead, Mike. Tell me whatever you think is important to say, please.
Okay, thanks, Ranger. I'll apologize in advance for any background noise here. Sitting in an airport, I'm in about as quiet a place as I could find. So I did retire about a year and a half ago from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. But prior to that, I had worked with some cities, MS4s here, and the University of Minnesota, some researchers there to do some research. The university was responsible for carrying out the research. My job was to translate that research into credits for street sweeping for the MS4s. Um, so all of that is documented. I can send the link. I don't know if you can show links or not, but I'll send a link to Ranger here. But our credit is based on mass removed. So basically, you go out and you collect it, you weigh it, you measure the water content, and we have relationships between phosphorus and nitrogen and the material that you're collecting. That credit varies depending on time of year. We have two times of year in Minnesota. It's the non-leaf drop season and then the leaf drop season. And as you can imagine, during leaf drop, the nutrient concentrations are quite a bit higher in the material being collected. The reason we did this whole crediting business in the first place was we felt that if done in the right place at the right time with the right equipment, street sweeping could be very effective. Literature had shown, we did a literature review as part of this. Literature had shown that street sweeping was not very effective, but the studies really were not done properly in my estimation. They were done in the wrong time or in the wrong place or whatever. So of course they didn't show much removal. Um, so based on our data, if you're after, well, our interest was nutrients, and I know that street sweeping can accomplish a lot more than just that. But if you do it in the right place at the right time and with the right equipment, here in Minnesota, you can get 60-70% of your annual phosphorus load, for example, picked up by street sweeping. So um, I'll leave it at that and let you ask any questions that you might have.
I do have some questions. Minnesota did some studies about street sweeping, and did you come up with better numbers than some of the ones you saw in the literature review? That make a difference?
Some of sorry again, I apologize for the background.
Yeah,
Better numbers than where?
what you saw in a literature review, yeah. Um,
Oh yeah, much better. It The Chesapeake Bay, for example, was one of the first, if not the first places that gave credit, and they were on the order of 5-10% maybe, if that even, of annual load. Here in Minnesota, like I said, if you do it at the right place, the right time, and so forth, you can get better than 50% of your annual load reduction for nutrients. Probably for solids too, but we were chasing nutrients more than we were solids. So yeah, the numbers are significantly better. And Bill Selbig's work in Wisconsin shows um, that the load for nutrients at least. The peaks are in spring and fall, and that's in Wisconsin. So,
Yeah, and I think in many places that's bound to be the case. And where did you say with the 5 to 10%? I missed where that was or what that was.
I believe those came out of the Chesapeake Bay area.
Yes. Okay.
Where they gave credits. Yeah, and they were based on some very minimal modeling that was done. The models really didn't represent. I didn't feel the models represented what was actually happening out there, I don't know what streets. They did give different credits for different sweeper types, but if you used a regenerative air sweeper, you didn't get much more credit than you did with a broom, for example, which I know is not the case. So.
Right. It's not the case, clearly. Uh, are there other technologies that you give credits for? In other words, some kind of catch basin cleaning filters or anything like that?
Oh, oh yeah, all the structural BMPs that in the stormwater world have credits:
Mhm.
bioretention, infiltration basins, wet ponds, green roofs,
Sure.
and so forth. What's really was missing um, were the source control practices like street sweeping.
Hmm.
There were really very few credits nationwide for any kind of source control, um,
Yeah.
and that goes beyond just street sweeping too. So.
Well, is there is that enough? The credits that are given, are they enough to encourage MS4's municipalities to sweep more than they would have otherwise, or to move vehicles and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and in fact, some of the cities that the University of Minnesota selected, they selected intentionally because they were doing street sweeping for water quality purposes. Historically, sweeping has not been done for water quality purposes, but so we had a few cities that participated in this process, this research that were doing it for water quality purposes. And there's a whole outreach component to this, as you can imagine. And so I've been keeping in contact with what's happening here. And the University of Minnesota now offers, I believe, don't quote me on this, but they believe they offer annual or semi-annual um, meetings just focused on street sweeping. And they're intended to be educational as well as interactive between folks that are doing the street sweeping.
Is there any anything that you're aware of that talks about how the sweeping is done? In other words, what I'm calling enhanced street sweeping programs, which would include vehicle removal. They would include making sure that the sweepers are kept up to specification as they operate, and not let the broom, if it's a broom sweeper, keep the broom bristles, long enough, and the curb broom bristles long enough for an air sweeper to keep the the sweeping hood, the rubber hood that's underneath, keep that where it doesn't get too short and so forth, just so that they're going to do the maximum possible. And it seems like one of the things that would encourage a street sweeping operation to do that would be they're going to pick up more material. And now that if they're getting credits by the most material they pick up, then you'd be encouraged to move cars because then you'd pick up more material. You'd keep your equipment in good shape because then you'd pick up more material and so forth. Is there anything looked at like that that you're aware of?
Most of the factors that would come into play with street sweeping were discussed during the development of this, but the focus was primarily on I'm kind of trying to think here. The focus was primarily on time of year. Um, we were well aware that there were other factors that eventually will need to be addressed, like ordinances around parking and uh, things like that, and the sweeper types. one of the big issues here is what to do with the material after it's collected, and so there's going to be some work done on that too. I'm anticipating that there'll be some work done on characterizing sweeping. So all of those things were discussed, but the primary focus was on um,
Time of year.
when to sweep
Right. Right. I
and
get.
how often and how often to sweep.
Mhm. Well, as you have heard in another meeting that you and I had, one of the things about sweeping that really needs to get changed is to bring it up to current technology standards, because there are cameras now that can take pictures of license plates of cars that were left in the way, and and get tickets to those folks. You're still going to pay for a lot of your sweeping program by that, but you're not going to have nearly the citizen unrest because they don't have to move their cars for 4 hours. They have to move them when the sweeper goes by, because you know that any ticketing is going to be by the license and the car that the sweeper sees as it goes by, not by somebody who comes by after the sweeper's gone and gives tickets. Plus, that costs the city less money um, as well. And it's as part of the Southern California Sea Grant NOAA study that we'll be doing with microplastics, with it key in on microplastics. We're getting an app developed where the citizens can go online and get to their sweeping route and see when the sweeper is going to happen, and get a pull down menu that says, let me know the day before, and let me know also that when the sweeper's a mile away, so I can make sure to get my car moved. So they don't have to move for 4 hours. I recently saw a video that came out of New York that somebody did, and I might link that along with our conversation. But it showed not only cars jumping out of the way when the sweeper came by, but also what happens when a car is parked. There were lots of leaves on the ground, and the sweeper, of course, has to go out at least one car length before the car and can't get in till at least one car length after the car. And so you're missing all that material. That's just going to be a dirty spot that's left over and nutrients that can wash off. So we need to work on those kinds of things too. I think best practices, uh, make sense. But I sure applaud that Minnesota is now giving credit. And when you say a credit, what's that actually mean um, to them?
So, for example, if you have a total maximum daily load or a permit requirement or whatever that says you have to reduce your load by 100 pounds of phosphorus. If you sweep the entire area that's contributing to whatever the permit requirement is, and you remove 50% of the phosphorus because of sweeping, that's the credit, is 50% or 50 pounds in this particular case.
Yeah.
So credits are generally expressed as a percentage of the pollutant that's coming in that's being removed versus what's coming out. So ponds, for example, are designed remove 80% of sediment, and so they get 80% credits.
Hmm. So that's essentially based on what your permit requirements are and whether you're meeting them or not, or showing that you're meeting your permit requirements. Um, for
In a regulatory setting, yeah.
Mhm.
But sometimes people do things because they don't necessarily have a regulatory driver. They just want to do the right thing. They have a local water body that they want to protect, and so we've
Mhm.
seen some of that here too in Minnesota.
Mhm. Well, that's applaudable, certainly, and they especially we need to get to let them know what the best practices are and what the enhanced sweeping is, and the vast difference between the pickup capability of an air sweeper versus a broom sweeper is, in the city of Los Angeles, recently shown as 35% pickup for a broom sweeper and 75% pickup for the regenerative air sweeper. So that's a big number. That's a big difference. And most of the studies that I've seen have not separated out those uh, two types of sweeper, or between broom sweeper and regenerative air and vacuum, for example, even. So um, I think that needs to happen with future tests, and then we'll know more, certainly. And
I think the whole sweeping issue is it's a package of things that need to be considered. You've talked about technology. I briefly mentioned, well, what are you going to do with the material on the back end of it? Um, how to sweep, when to sweep, and all that kind of stuff that plays into it. So I mean, there's a lot of parts to the whole street sweeping thing. It's not just go out and sweep it. And I think that there's an opportunity there for folks that are interested in different aspects of street sweeping to kind of get that message out. So, for example, if I believe you spoke at the very first training we had here in Minnesota way back, you may not remember that, but
remember that, yeah.
you gave a little spiel there, and I think that the people who are doing the sweeping need to hear about these new technologies. They're certainly interested in the credits if they're representing MS4. They're concerned about what to do with the material after they collect it. So
Right. And it's a sort of a difficulty, because when you talk about particular times of year when there's a lot of leaf fall, and you're trying to get rid of that, you need a broom sweeper for some amount of that. An air sweeper's not going to be able to do it if it's all that thick and matted down and so forth. Won't do a good job. But if a broom sweeper, to me, a broom sweeper should get fewer credits at some point. And if you followed a broom sweeper by an air sweeper, at least one study showed they could pick up as much as 500 pounds per curb mile following right behind a broom sweeper. So, and another,
we have
Mike.
we have guidance here in Minnesota, and it was unfortunate in a way, not for me because I retired, but it was unfortunate that I left right after we developed this guidance. But that's exactly what you were speaking about. That's exactly what one of the items in our guidance is. If during leaf fall, go out with a broom sweeper, get up the bulk of the leaves, and then follow it up with a regenerative air to get the crumbly stuff that's left behind. So.
Yeah. And that's by far the small micron debris where, there tends to be, for reasons of physics, a lot more pollutants in the smaller stuff. So it becomes more important to do that. And, another item that's hiding here as they say, in the woodpile is the fact about um, using water for dust suppression. I did an estimate analysis a couple months ago, and the answer I got was that sweepers pick up about 3 million gallons of perfectly good drinking water a day and pollute it, and then trundle it off to a landfill someplace and dump it. So and so that's a conundrum. You need the water, and or something to keep the dust down for safety. There's no question. But there's also been a study that showed that if you didn't use water and just swept dry, that you would pick up enough more material because it wouldn't be left on the street in a water slurry fashion, that you gain about 20% of your small micron pickup. But at the same time, you might be putting up a dust cloud that is very dangerous to the community around you, and nobody wants to see in terms of air quality either. So there's some other things out there that are just unsettled still at the moment.
Yeah, and sweeping, I think, is going to be very location specific. In Minnesota, for example, air quality isn't nearly as big an issue as it is in Southern California. So,
Yeah, yeah. So they're not seeing that as being nearly as big a deal as uh, as they are in Southern California. Is there anything else we should talk about? I appreciate what you've had to say here and taking your time, not only as you return through an airport, but now that you're retired. Uh, it'd be nice to be in your position in both cases.
yeah, I get to pick and choose the work that I do now. So I am doing some work. I'm with the STEP program, which we talked about this morning, I think, and where we offer verified credits. Sweeping is still on the early stages of development, so we don't have those verified credits yet. And it's going to be a while before we get them, but we think that working with the industry and the researchers and that we'll eventually get to some verified credits that people can actually use in meeting their requirements, whatever those requirements are. So, I mean, it's just credits were a big deal when I worked, and it was always a little disconcerting to me to say this particular practice gets this much removal, but we're really not sure if that's true or not. And so and we in fact found ponds, for example, were very very much underperforming compared to what they were supposed to be. So that's the work I'm doing now, is to try to verify this work. And if sweeping gets there, then that would be great, because I think sweeping, like you said, offers a really low cost opportunity to um, to deal with some of these pollutant issues. And again, my mantra is always in the right place with the right time with the right equipment. I keep saying that over and over, because I've seen sweepers come out and sweep clean streets, and it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So
So thank you, and I hope your arms don't get tired flying home, but I bet you'll be fine.
yeah, I'll be glad to get home. I won't be glad about the temperatures, but I live in
Oh,
Minnesota, so
yeah.
it's chilly there. But thanks for all your good work, and there's a lot happening with street sweeping now, and I think things will really, it's real promising work. So
It is. It's coming at the end of my career, so it's kind of like what happened to you. I agree. Thanks.
yeah, it's a little tough to let go when you've dedicated so much time to things, but sometimes you just got to move on.
Yep, yep, that's it. Plenty of things to move on to. All right, thanks. Again, we've been talking to Mike Trojan, and Mike, for a very long time, has been investigating the best ways to remove stormwater runoff pollution for the state of Minnesota, and he is now an emeritus in that project, but that means he knows more than lots of other people do. So thanks again, Mike.